First, let me say how much I regret that I can't be with you this evening to accept this honor and award. As you know, I've been asked to lead a delegation of ministers from the Commonwealth to go to Pakistan to deal with the military regime there and to return to the Commonwealth leaders meeting with an assessment about the possibilities and the hopes for restoration of democracy in that country. But I do want to take this opportunity to thank members of the Foundation, particularly to Jennifer Simons for giving me this acknowledgement and for the work that we've been doing in foreign affairs on the nuclear issue. I would like to say that the Foundation under Jennifer's leadership has certainly been a prime example of the active, energetic role that civil groups play in the pursuit of the broad values that we as Canadians hold. It is an example of the partnership that we have been able to forge with civil society over the last 2 or 3 years that has enabled us to take an active role on the Anti-Personnel Landmine Treaty, the International Criminal Court, efforts to deal with problems of small arms trade, with the problems of children in war-affected conflicts, and recently the work that we're doing at the United Nations to try to protect civilians. For example, I'm very pleased that just over 10 days ago we were able to have the United Nations Security Council adopt a mandate for a peacekeeping effort in Sierra Leone that has as its specific mandate protection of civilians, protection of the most vulnerable, protection of women and children who have been so badly violated during that period of conflict. It really does demonstrate that the human security concept, a principle that was put forward in our throne speech as an underlying objective of Canadian foreign policy, the pursuit of protection for individuals, is taking on a broad and I believe increasingly effective area of influence at the United Nations, another multilateral fora, and certainly really has become very much part of the expression of Canadian interest, objectives, and hopes, and particularly talents that we can bring to the rest of the world. But in dealing with the question of human security, let's also be clear that at the very base of that principle and objective is the ongoing and continuing threat of nuclear energy and nuclear annihilation. I don't think many of us disagree that it is still acts as the template for concern about the value of human life in our society. And Canadians consistently express the concern about the nuclear weapon threat, and therefore it makes it an ongoing priority that we come to grips with those efforts. This is a concern that's brought you to Vancouver. It certainly undergirds the efforts that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has undertaken to pursue global action, to promote non-proliferation and disarmament. Some of you know, 2 years ago I asked the Canadian Parliament, the Committee on Foreign Affairs, to assess the current state of nuclear challenges and to recommend on how Canada can most effectively respond. The report prepared by members of the Foreign Affairs Committee was a very comprehensive one, and I believe in terms of Western democracies, the most up-to-date and relevant assessment that's been made, again with a very broad, vast participation of Canadians from across the country. It helped shape a government response that we released in April this year that outlined Canada's role and contained a clear agenda for the continuing engagement of Canadians in this very vital topic. This approach that we put forward in April, based upon that Foreign Affairs report, is focused foremost on building a strong global nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament regime. Since we forego nuclear weapons ourselves over 50 years ago, Canadians have devoted considerable energy and imagination to realizing this goal. However, we're at a time in our history when the careful architecture that has been built up over those decades is increasingly fragile, is under renewed strain, is under renewed challenge and threat. The nuclear testing in South Asia last year combined with the political instability there, underlines this threat with startling clarity. Vertical proliferation remains a challenge. There's been undeniable progress in areas of nuclear disarmament, but there's also a disturbing trend to justify retaining nuclear arms as a defense against other weapons or on economic grounds. Finally, the prospects of the illicit transfers of nuclear weapons grade material is emerging also as a broad and quite disturbing area of the nuclear question. Canada is moving to address these challenges, and in order to preserve the integrity and viability of the non-proliferation regime, there's a number of very important steps that we must all take and that we in particular have become involved in. First, we have to re-engage the commitment and interest of the United States. They are the primary, foremost nuclear nation in the world. They have, in the past, led efforts on nuclear disarmament, but with the rejection by the Senate of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, we have all suffered a serious setback. It was really a repudiation of 40 years of American leadership in this area, and the trend must be reversed. We must combat it. Last week in Boston, at a speech I gave to the United Nations Association, I tried to set out how the United States administration, the Clinton administration, should not simply walk away from this defeat in the Senate, but in fact should use it as a platform to reignite, reinvigorate their efforts to re-energize bilateral arms talks with the Russians, to undertake a commitment to restart the discussion on nuclear weapons at the Conference on Disarmament in Geneva, to take a more open-minded approach to the NATO review of its arms control and disarmament policies. For half a century, Canada and the United States have worked closely in addressing nuclear arms control and disarmament challenges, and it must continue to remain an area of our cooperation. In addition to trying to use our influence and our persuasion with our American neighbors, we are also active on a number of other fronts. Canada has taken the lead in condemning the testing in both India and Pakistan, has called on them to stop the weaponization of their nuclear programs and to impose controls on the export of nuclear technology. Canada will not legitimize their or any other claims or confer any new status on them simply because they possess nuclear weapons. Indeed, we will adamantly oppose any attempts to do this and work to convince the international community, including the United States, to do likewise. And I hope that during my trip to Pakistan this weekend, I will also have the opportunity to carry that message. We must also, however, understand that there is a frustration around the world with the lack of progress in nuclear disarmament. And nuclear weapon states, if they're going to make the NPT work, must also hold up their end of the bargain. And therefore we will continue to encourage all of these states, not just the U.S., to devote new energy to disarmament efforts. In the case of the United States and Russia, perhaps it's time to rethink the START II process. It really has been stalemated in both countries. Perhaps it's time to start a deeper, broader understanding of strategic arms reductions, to restart START and come up with whether it's START 5 or 33 or 99, it's important that we put in place a new arrangement and to begin to address the increasingly broadening articles of tactical nuclear weapons that have both have removed from operational status. At the same time, great care should be taken not to undermine the integrity of the ABM Treaty. It is a very fundamental foundation to the broad nuclear proliferation regime. We must be careful that any proposed changes that are incompatible with its intent, that might damage a system which for almost 30 years has underpinned nuclear restraint, must not be allowed, and that therefore this whole debate about the integrity and inviolability of the ABM Treaty is very much on our agenda. I also believe that we must continue working on the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. Despite the Senate's decision, the CTBT remains a vital instrument to constrain the engagement of existing nuclear arsenals and to block states with nuclear aspirations from developing weapons technology of their own. Canadians have fought long and hard for this treaty, and we will not give up now. Earlier this month, at our initiative, 100 nations gathered in Vienna to review the status of the treaty's entry into force. The result was an unambiguous reaffirmation of global support. Canada will continue to press for the earliest possible entry into force of the CTBT, and we certainly welcome and encourage broad public mobilization behind these efforts. In addition, it's very important that we negotiate a fissile material cutoff treaty. Banning the production of weapons-grade material is crucial. It really cuts off the oxygen that fuels weapons production and proliferation. Canada is at the center of efforts in Geneva to this end. We will pursue all avenues to overcome obstacles in the way of negotiations. In the meantime, we are encouraging all nations to adhere to a voluntary productions moratorium. Finally, I think it is very important that we really address the opening that was established at the Washington Conference of NATO to begin a review of NATO's arms control and disarmament policy. Canada believes that NATO needs to review its arms control and disarmament. The alliance should have an approach that looks to the future and not to the past. When in Washington this spring, the NATO leaders underlined the alliance's commitment to the full implementation of the NPT and recognized the reduced salience of nuclear weapons, they tasked foreign ministers with examining non-proliferation arms control and disarmament options. I think you all know that Canada worked very hard to achieve these important steps, and we will maintain a very active role in shaping future debate, in particular a debate with the United States, which is critical to the success of this allied effort. One result, and I think it's an option that we are carefully exploring, could be an updated version of the 1989 comprehensive concept of arms control and disarmament, which is part of the NATO strategic package. I'm mindful that the award presented to me this evening is given in part because of Canada's role in promoting this NATO review. Alliance foreign ministers will meet in December to follow up. And again, I want to assure you of my commitment to sending a strong signal that NATO is part of the solution to global non-proliferation and disarmament challenges. Together, these kinds of actions represent a challenging, full agenda, encouraging renewed United States leadership, stopping future proliferators, promoting disarmament by the nuclear powers, pursuing the CTBT and the Fissile Material Cutoff Treaty, and pressing for a substantive review of NATO's policy. This is not just an agenda for me or the government alone to carry out. Civil society has an important role to play, and I value your contribution. The input of NGOs, academics, and individuals to last year's report of Parliament was a determining factor in shaping Canada's current nuclear policy and maintaining the strong commitment of Canadian public opinion on this vital issue. But it does not end there. We are now organizing the government's first annual consultation with civil society on nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation issues to be held early next year. And I'm pleased that Dr. Simons will serve on the steering committee coordinating this effort. I look forward to meeting with many of you during that time. Ladies and gentlemen, the hands of the atomic clock, unfortunately, continue to move forward. Decisive action is needed to halt the proliferation of nuclear weapons and to reduce nuclear arsenals in order to reverse this trend for good. This year, we all look hopefully to midnight, December 31st, and the start of a new century. The atomic clock is 1 and must never be allowed to strike 12. Let's look for something much more hopeful than that. Thank you again for the award, and enjoy your dinner. Good night.